The blood-soaked letter trembled in Sophia Blackwood's hands as she read it for the 100th time, the Arizona Territory sun beating down mercilessly on her neck. Her brother was dead, murdered by the same outlaw gang that had destroyed everything else she loved. The year was 1878, and justice in these parts came from the barrel of a gun, not from any law book or court. "Miss, you feeling all right?" A deep voice pulled her from her thoughts. Sophia looked up to see a tall man blocking the sun, his silhouette crowned by a wide-brimmed hat. She hastily folded the letter and tucked it into her dress pocket. "I'm quite fine," she lied, wiping a tear with her dusty glove. "Begging your pardon, but folks who are quite fine don't usually sit crying at train stations with nowhere to go." The man stepped closer, and she could now see him clearly. He wore simple trail clothes, faded denim, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing tanned forearms, and a well-worn leather vest. His face was weathered but kind, with striking blue eyes that seemed to pierce right through her carefully constructed walls. "I'm Drake Holloway," he said, removing his hat. "I run the Double H Ranch about 10 miles outside of Redemption." He gestured to the small frontier town beyond the train station. "Sophia Blackwood," she replied curtly, "and my destination is none of your concern, Mr. Holloway." Drake's eyebrows raised slightly. "Well, Miss Blackwood, considering the next train isn't due for 3 days, and you've been sitting here since sunrise looking like you're planning someone's funeral, I thought you might need assistance." Sophia clutched her small leather satchel tighter. "What I need is for people to leave me be." To her surprise, he smiled. "Fair enough." He placed his hat back on his head and tipped it slightly. "If you change your mind, I'll be at Murphy's saloon getting supplies before heading back to my ranch." He turned and walked away, his spurs jingling with each step. Sophia watched him go, fighting the urge to call him back. But she couldn't involve anyone else in her mission, not when the infamous Blackwell Gang was her target. They'd already killed her father, mother, and now her brother. She was alone in the world, with nothing but vengeance burning in her heart. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street as Sophia finally rose from the bench. Her legs ached from sitting so long, and her stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday. With reluctance, she made her way toward the small frontier town of Redemption. The town wasn't much a single main street lined with wooden buildings, most with false fronts attempting to look grander than they were. A general store, a barber shop, the sheriff's office, and at the far end, Murphy's saloon. As she walked, men tipped their hats while women eyed her curiously. She was a stranger here, and in towns like this, strangers were either trouble or running from it. Murphy's saloon was a typical frontier establishment. Loud piano music spilled through the swinging doors along with the smell of whiskey and tobacco. Sophia hesitated at the entrance. Ladies of quality didn't enter such places unescorted, but she was long past caring about such proprieties. She pushed through the doors, the piano briefly faltering as heads turned to stare at her. At the bar, leaning casually with one boot propped on the brass rail, was Drake Holloway. Their eyes met, and he didn't look surprised to see her. Sophia approached him directly, ignoring the whispers and stares. "Mr. Holloway, I've reconsidered your offer of assistance." "Have you now?" He signaled to the barkeep for another drink. "And what changed your mind, Miss Blackwood?" "Necessity," she replied honestly. "I need information about the Blackwell Gang." Drake's expression darkened instantly. He grabbed her elbow not roughly, but firmly, and guided her to a corner table away from curious ears. "You'd best keep your voice down when mentioning that name around here," he said, his voice low. "What business does a lady like yourself have with those killers?" Sophia met his gaze steadily. "They murdered my family. My brother was the last. I received news of his death yesterday." She pulled out the blood-stained letter. "I'm going to find them, and I'm going to make them pay." Drake stared at her for a long moment before shaking his head. "Revenge won't bring your family back, Miss Blackwood. I'm not seeking to bring them back. I'm seeking justice." And how exactly do you plan to get justice against 7 of the most dangerous men in the territory? Men who have killed dozens and evaded the law for years. Sophia reached into her satchel and pulled out a Colt revolver. She kept it hidden beneath the table, but made sure Drake saw it. "I'm not without skills, Mr. Holloway," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A single pistol against 7 hardened killers. That's not justice, Miss Blackwood. That's suicide." "I can't be saved," she said flatly. "My path was set the moment they killed my father." Drake leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "Then I'll prove you wrong." "Excuse me." "You can be saved, Miss Blackwood, from them and from yourself." He took a sip of his whiskey. "I know these men. I've tracked them before. You're a lawman." "Was. U.S. Marshal for 5 years before I bought my ranch. The Blackwell Gang killed my partner 3 years ago." His jaw tightened at the memory. "I've been gathering information on them ever since, waiting for the right time." Hope flared in Sophia's chest for the first time in months. "Then you'll help me." "Not to get yourself killed, no." He finished his drink in one swallow. "But I'll help you bring them to justice, proper justice. A rope around their necks after a fair trial." Sophia scoffed. "There's no justice in courtrooms out here. You know that as well as I do." "Maybe not, but there's no justice in getting yourself killed either." Drake stood up. "I'm heading back to my ranch tonight. You're welcome to come along. We can discuss your options, and I can show you what I know about the gang's movements." Sophia hesitated. She didn't know this man, and following a stranger to his isolated ranch seemed unwise. Yet she had few choices, and if he truly had information about the Blackwell Gang. "I'll come," she decided. "But understand this, Mr. Holloway, I will have my vengeance with or without your help." Drake's expression was unreadable. "We'll see about that, Miss Blackwood." He offered his arm. "My wagon's out back. We should reach the ranch before midnight." The journey to Drake's ranch was mostly silent. Sophia sat beside him on the wagon bench, watching the landscape change from the dusty main street to rolling prairie under a vast canopy of stars. The night air grew cold, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Here," Drake said, handing her a blanket from behind the seat. "Desert nights get cold." "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping it around herself. "How much farther?" "About 2 miles. See those lights ahead." That's the Double H. In the distance, Sophia could make out the warm glow of lanterns. As they drew closer, the ranch came into view, a substantial main house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals containing horses that were dark shapes against the night sky. "It's larger than I expected," Sophia admitted. "Been building it up for 3 years now," Drake replied with a hint of pride. "Started with nothing but a shack and 10 acres. Now I've got 500 acres and 24 horses. You did this alone?" "Got a few hands that help out. Good men." He guided the wagon into the yard. "There's Saul now." An older man with a silver beard approached, taking the reins as Drake climbed down. "Evening, boss," Saul said, then noticed Sophia. "Madam," he added with a respectful nod. "Saul, this is Miss Blackwood." "She'll be staying with us for a while," Drake said, helping Sophia down from the wagon. "Miss Blackwood, this is Saul Tucker, my foreman and the best horseman in 3 territories." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Tucker," Sophia said. "Likewise, madam." Saul looked at Drake with a raised eyebrow. "I'll put up the team. Martha left some stew warming on the stove before she went home." "Thanks, Saul. Come on, Miss Blackwood, you must be hungry." Drake led her to the main house, which was surprisingly comfortable inside. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with sturdy furniture arranged around it. Bookshelves lined another wall, something Sophia hadn't expected in a cowboy's home. "You read," she observed, running her fingers along the spines of several leather-bound volumes. "A man's got to exercise his mind as well as his body," Drake replied, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "My father was a schoolteacher back in Virginia, made sure I had an education before I came west." He moved to the kitchen and returned with 2 bowls of steaming stew. "Martha's my housekeeper. Comes in during the day, leaves me enough food to get by." They ate in silence for a few minutes, Sophia realizing just how hungry she'd been. The stew was rich with beef, potatoes, and carrots, the first proper meal she'd had in days. "Now," Drake said when they'd finished, "let's talk about why you're really here." Sophia straightened her back. "I told you, I'm going to find the men who killed my family. And I told you that's suicide." He stood and walked to a cabinet, unlocking it with a key from his pocket. From inside, he withdrew a thick leather portfolio. "But if you're determined to face them, you should at least know what you're up against." He placed the portfolio on the table between them and opened it, revealing maps, wanted posters, and handwritten notes. "The Blackwell Gang is led by Jeremiah Blackwell," Drake explained, pointing to a sketch of a hard-faced man with a prominent scar across his right cheek. "Former Confederate officer, turned to outlawry after the war. He's smart, methodical, and utterly ruthless." Sophia studied the face, committing it to memory. "He was there when they killed my father. I saw him." Drake looked up sharply. "You witnessed the murder?" "I was hiding in the root cellar. They didn't know I was there." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I saw everything through the floorboards, heard everything too." "I'm sorry," Drake said quietly. "No one should have to witness something like that." Sophia ignored his sympathy. "Who are the others?" Drake continued the briefing, showing her sketches and information about each gang member, the Keller brothers, known for their knife work. Tom Quickdraw Jenkins, who'd reportedly killed 19 men in gunfights. Hector Mendoza, a former Mexican army scout who knew the territory better than anyone. And the twins, Samuel and Seth Porter, who served as the gang's lookouts and trackers. "And where are they now?" Sophia asked when he'd finished. Drake unfolded a map. Last report had them moving through Apache territory, heading toward the New Mexico border, but that was 2 weeks ago. "Then that's where I'll go," Drake shook his head. "Not alone, you won't. That's Kairikahua country. You'd likely run into trouble with them before you ever found the Blackwells." "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest you get some rest tonight. Tomorrow, I'll show you what I know about tracking, shooting, and surviving in this territory. If you're still determined to go after them after that, then I'll go with you." Sophia's eyes widened. "You'd leave your ranch, risk your life. As I said, they killed my partner. This isn't just your fight." He closed the portfolio. "Besides, I made a promise to prove you wrong, to show you that you can be saved." "I don't need saving, Mr. Holloway. I need vengeance." Drake's eyes softened. "Maybe what you need is justice. And maybe, just maybe, in finding it, you'll find something worth living for again." Sophia looked away, unwilling to let him see how his words affected her. "Where will I sleep tonight? I'll show you to the guest room. It's not fancy, but it's clean." He stood, gathering their empty bowls. "We'll start at dawn tomorrow." As Sophia followed him down a short hallway, she wondered what she'd gotten herself into. This man was a stranger, yet she was putting her trust in him, something she hadn't done since the day her family was murdered. Whether that trust was misplaced remained to be seen. The guest room was simple but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window looking out toward the distant mountains. Drake lit a lamp on the bedside table. There are fresh linens in the chest at the foot of the bed and water in the pitcher. Bathrooms down the hall. He paused at the doorway. "Sleep well, Miss Blackwood. Tomorrow will be a long day." After he left, Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, driven by her mission of vengeance. Now, in this quiet room, with the knowledge that someone else understood her pain, she felt the weight of her grief crash down upon her. For the first time since her brother's death, she allowed herself to cry. Dawn broke clear and cold over the Double H Ranch. Sophia woke to the sound of activity outside, men's voices, the nickering of horses, the clang of metal on metal from what she guessed was the blacksmith's forge. She dressed quickly in the only clothes. She had a practical traveling dress of dark blue cotton, now wrinkled from days of wear. A knock at her door startled her. "Miss Blackwood, you awake?" It was Drake's voice. "Yes, just a moment." She hastily pinned her long brown hair into a simple bun and opened the door. Drake stood there, already dressed for the day in denims, a fresh shirt and his leather vest. Morning. Thought you might need these. He held out a bundle of clothing. They belonged to my sister when she visited last year, might be more practical for what we'll be doing today. Sophia accepted the bundle, surprised. You have a sister. Younger by 2 years, lives in Denver with her husband. He gestured to the clothes. There's trousers, shirts, and a riding skirt if you prefer. Breakfast is ready when you are. With that, he turned and left her to change. The clothes fit reasonably well, the trousers a bit loose at the waist but otherwise serviceable. Sophia chose a simple blue shirt to go with them and was startled by her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. She looked different, less like the proper banker's daughter she'd been raised to be, and more like a woman of the frontier. In the kitchen, Drake was setting out plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. He looked up when she entered, his eyes widening slightly at her transformation. They suit you, he said simply. Thank you, I've never worn trousers before. They're quite liberating. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Eat up, we've got a full day ahead. After breakfast, Drake led her to a corral where Saul was working with a chestnut mare. This is Penny, Drake said. She's steady and smart, a good mount for learning. I know how to ride, Sophia informed him. Side saddle in a park is different from riding these trails, Drake replied. Saul will help you get comfortable with a western saddle while I take care of some business. After that, we'll head out. For the next hour, Sophia worked with Saul, learning the differences between her Eastern riding experience and the practical horsemanship needed in the territory. The old cowboy was patient but exacting, correcting her posture and technique until she could mount, dismount, and control Penny with confidence. When Drake returned, he was leading a tall black gelding and carrying 2 rifle cases. Ready for the next lesson? He asked, handing the reins of his horse to Saul. What are we learning now? Drake held up the rifle cases. How to shoot properly. They walked to a clearing behind the barn where Drake had set up several targets, tin cans on fence posts at varying distances. What experience do you have with firearms? He asked, opening one of the cases to reveal a Winchester repeating rifle. Sophia withdrew her Colt from her satchel. My brother taught me to shoot this. I'm reasonably accurate at close range. Drake examined the revolver. It's a good weapon, but limited. You'll need more than this. He handed her the Winchester. This is a model 1873, 15 rounds in the magazine, reliable in all conditions. For the next 2 hours, Drake instructed her in the proper handling, loading, and firing of the rifle. Sophia was a quick study, her determination making up for her lack of experience. By midday, she was hitting targets at 50 yards with reasonable consistency. Not bad, Drake admitted as she reloaded. But hitting a stationary target is different from facing a man who's shooting back. I'm aware of that, Sophia said sharply. I'm not naive. Never said you were, just making sure you understand what you're preparing for. He took the rifle from her and slung it over his shoulder. Come on, let's get some lunch, then we'll ride out. I want to show you something. After a simple meal of cold beef sandwiches, they saddled their horses and rode out from the ranch. Drake led them eastward, toward a range of low hills that shimmered in the heat of the afternoon sun. Where are we going? Sophia asked as they rode side by side across the open prairie. There's an old Apache lookout point in those hills. Gives a view of about 30 miles in all directions. Good place to understand the territory. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic creaking of saddle leather and the soft thud of hooves on earth the only sounds. Sophia found herself studying Drake as he rode the easy way he sat his horse, the alertness in his posture despite his relaxed appearance. He was a man comfortable in this harsh environment, a man who understood its dangers and its beauty. How did you become a marshal? She asked suddenly. Drake glanced at her, then back at the trail. War ended, and I had no taste for going back east. Drifted for a while, did some scouting for the army. Got in a scrape with some outlaws in El Paso, ended up helping the local marshal bring them in. He recommended me to the federal service. And your partner, the one the Blackwells killed, Drake's jaw tightened. His name was Henry Ellis. Good man. We rode together for 3 years. They ambushed us near the border. Henry took 3 bullets meant for me. I'm sorry, Sophia said quietly. After that, I turned in my badge. Couldn't stomach the politics. Any more marshals expected to look the other way when powerful men broke the law, but hunt down small-time rustlers with full force. He shook his head. Bought this land with my savings, built something that was mine. Yet you've been tracking the Blackwells all this time. Some debts can't be ignored, Miss Blackwood. They reached the base of the hills and followed a narrow trail that wound upward. The terrain grew rockier, forcing them to proceed in single file, with Drake leading. After about 20 minutes of steady climbing, they emerged onto a flat outcropping that offered a commanding view of the surrounding landscape. Drake dismounted and helped Sophia down, then secured both horses to a stunted pine tree. He walked to the edge of the outcropping and gestured for her to join him. Look out there, he said, pointing toward the vast expanse of territory spread before them. What do you see? Sophia squinted against the sun. Hills, valleys, some forests to the north, open country to the south. That's right, and somewhere out there are the men you're hunting. Drake turned to face her. This territory is over 90,000 square miles, Miss Blackwood, much of it unmapped, all of it dangerous. The Blackwells know it like the backs of their hands. They have friends and informants in a dozen settlements. They can disappear like ghosts when they need to. Are you trying to discourage me, Mr. Holloway? I'm trying to make you understand the reality of what you're proposing. This isn't some Eastern manhunt with police on every corner. Out here, you could search for years and never find them, or you could stumble right into them and be dead before you knew what happened. Sophia met his gaze steadily. Then why help me at all? Why not just send me on my way? Drake was silent for a long moment. Because I saw something in your eyes at that train station, something I recognized. He looked back out at the landscape. You've lost everything, and now vengeance is the only thing keeping you going. I know that feeling. And yet you counsel patience and caution. Because I've seen what happens to people consumed by revenge. It hollows them out until there's nothing left. He turned back to her, his blue eyes intense. You said you can't be saved. I disagree. But salvation isn't just about keeping you alive, it's about making sure there's something worth living for after your vengeance is satisfied. His words struck Sophia deeply, touching on fears she hadn't acknowledged even to herself. What would be left of her once the Blackwells were dealt with? Who would she be without her mission of vengeance? I don't know if I can be that person again, she admitted softly. The woman I was before they killed my family. She died that day, too. You don't have to be who you were, Drake said, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. But you can become someone new, someone stronger, someone who survived. A sudden gust of wind swept across the outcropping, bringing with it the scent of sage and pine. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the wildness of this place seep into her bones. Show me, she whispered. Show me how to find them, how to bring them to justice without losing myself in the process. Drake nodded, a small smile touching his lips. That's a start. They spent the next hour on the outcropping, as Drake pointed out landmarks, trails, and settlements, explaining how outlaws used the terrain to evade pursuit. He showed her how to read the landscape, to spot signs of recent passage, to understand the patterns that even the most careful fugitives tended to follow. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they mounted up and started back toward the ranch. The return journey was easier, both of them more comfortable in each other's presence. Tomorrow, Drake said as they rode, we'll work more on your shooting and I'll teach you how to track. If you're going to face the Blackwells, you need every advantage. And then we'll plan our next move. I have an idea where they might be headed based on their usual patterns. He glanced at her. But understand this, we do this my way. No rushing and half-cocked. No heroics. If we find them, we observe, we plan, and we act only when the time is right. Sophia wanted to argue but held her tongue. Drake was offering her something invaluable, not just his knowledge and skills, but a chance to achieve her vengeance without it destroying her. It was more than she'd hoped for when she'd arrived in redemption. "Your way," she agreed. "For now." They reached the ranch just as twilight was settling over the land. The lamps were already lit in the main house, casting a warm glow across the yard. As they dismounted, Saul emerged from the barn. "Any trouble?" he asked Drake. "None. How's things here?" "All quiet." "Got a message from town, though." Saul handed Drake a folded piece of paper. "Ryder brought it about an hour ago." Drake unfolded the note and read it, his expression darkening. "When did this come in?" "Like I said, about an hour ago. Sheriff's deputy brought it himself." Drake folded the note and tucked it into his vest pocket. "Thanks, Saul. Take care of the horses, would you? Miss Blackwood and I need to talk." Sophia followed Drake into the house, curious and concerned by his reaction to the message. Once inside, he lit several lamps and turned to face her. "What is it?" she asked. "What's happened?" Drake pulled the note from his pocket. "Report from a stagecoach driver. The Blackwell Gang hit a Wells Fargo shipment near Contention yesterday, killed the driver and guard, took everything." Sophia's heart raced. Contention. That's only 40 miles from here. Yes, and according to this, they were headed southwest. Drake unfolded a map on the table. That puts them on a course that could bring them within 20 miles of redemption. Then we need to go after them now, while the trail is fresh. Drake shook his head. "Not yet. We're not ready." "Not ready?" Sophia's voice rose in frustration. "They're closer than they've been in months. This could be our only chance. And if we rush out there unprepared, it will be our last chance." Drake's tone was firm. "I promise to help you bring them to justice, not to lead you to your death. Every day we wait is another day they could slip away." "They won't," Drake pointed to the map. "Southwest of here is rough country, few water sources, difficult terrain. They'll have to slow down, especially if they're carrying heavy loot. We have time to prepare properly." Sophia paced across the room, her frustration evident in every step. "I've waited months for this opportunity. My brother's blood is still fresh on their hands. And rushing in will only add your blood to it." Drake's voice softened. "I understand your urgency, Sophia. Truly, I do, but we need to be smart about this." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her pause. 3 days, he continued. "Give me 3 days to finish your training, to gather supplies, to make sure we're ready. Then we'll go after them, and I promise you, we'll find them." Sophia wanted to argue further, but the logic of his words was undeniable. She was still a novice with the rifle, still learning the basics of tracking and survival in this harsh territory. Rushing into a confrontation with 7 experienced killers would be suicide. 3 days, she agreed reluctantly. "Not a day more." "Good." Drake rolled up the map. "Now, let's get some supper. Tomorrow we'll start early." That night, sleep eluded Sophia. She lay awake in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of vengeance and justice. The Blackwells were closer than they'd been since the day they'd murdered her father. Part of her still wanted to saddle a horse and ride out tonight, to hunt them down like the animals they were. But another part, a part that was growing stronger with each passing hour, spent in Drake's company, recognized the wisdom in his caution. She wanted vengeance, yes, but she also wanted to live. And for the first time since receiving news of her brother's death, she allowed herself to consider a future beyond her mission of retribution. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She rose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and opened it to find Drake standing there, a lamp in his hand. "I saw your light was still on," he said quietly. "Thought you might like this." He held out a small leather-bound book. "What is it?" she asked, accepting it. "My journal from my martial days. It has information about the Blackwells, their habits, their methods. Thought it might help you understand who we're dealing with." "Thank you." She ran her fingers over the worn leather cover. "I appreciate this." Drake nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say more. Sophia, I meant what I said. We will find them, and they will answer for what they've done to your family. And to your partner, she added. Yes, to Henry too. He met her gaze, his blue eyes reflecting the lamplight. Try to get some sleep. Dawn comes early out here. As he turned to go, Sophia surprised herself by reaching out to touch his arm. Drake, he looked back, his expression questioning, thank you for all of this, for believing I could be saved when I didn't believe it myself. A small smile touched his lips. The jury's still out on that, Miss Blackwood, but I'm starting to like our odds. With that, he was gone, leaving Sophia with a strange warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with vengeance or justice. She returned to bed, the journal clutched in her hands, and for the first time in months, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intense training. Each morning began before dawn with target practice, Drake patiently correcting Sophia's stance and technique until her shots consistently found their mark. Afternoons were spent on horseback, learning to track through different terrains, reading broken twigs, disturbed soil, the subtle signs of human passage that most eyes would miss. In the evenings, they pored over maps and Drake's notes, planning their approach, discussing strategies for different scenarios. Sophia absorbed everything he taught her, her determination never wavering, but now tempered with a growing appreciation for Drake's methodical approach. On the morning of the 4th day, they set out before first light, their horses loaded with supplies for what might be a weeks-long hunt. Saul and 2 other ranch hands stood in the yard to see them off. Take care of the place while I'm gone, Drake told his foreman. And if we're not back in 3 weeks, I know, boss, Saul interrupted. Send word to the marshal in Tucson. The old cowboy's eyes shifted to Sophia. You watch his back, miss. He tends to forget he ain't bulletproof. Sophia nodded solemnly. I will, Mr. Tucker. They rode southwest, following the route indicated by the stagecoach driver's report. The terrain gradually changed from the open grassland surrounding the Double H to rockier, more broken country, a landscape of mesas, arroyos, and sparse vegetation. The heat built as the sun climbed higher, and Sophia was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat Drake had given her. By midday, they reached a shallow river cutting through a rocky gorge. Drake dismounted, studying the ground near the water's edge. They came through here, he said, pointing to marks in the mud. 7 horses, 1 carrying double probably the loot from the stage, 2 maybe 3 days ago. Sophia slid from her saddle, joining him at the riverbank. Which way did they go? Drake pointed downstream. They followed the river for a while. Smart move, water hides tracks, and in this heat, they'd need to stay close to it. They watered their horses and rested briefly in the scant shade of a rocky overhang, sharing a meal of jerky and hardtack. Sophia studied Drake as he consulted his map, noting the focused intensity in his eyes, the confident way he read the terrain. In just a few days, he'd become someone she trusted implicitly, a feeling she hadn't experienced since her family's deaths. What will we do when we find them? She asked, breaking the silence. Drake looked up from the map. Depends on the situation. Ideally, we track them to wherever they're holed up, observe their routine, then I'll ride for the nearest settlement with a telegram office. Get word to the marshals, maybe round up a posse. And if that's not possible, he folded the map carefully, then we'll have to be creative. But I won't lie to you, Sophia, taking on 7 men, even with surprise on our side, won't be easy. I'm not afraid. That's what worries me. Drake's expression was serious. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. A healthy dose of it is no bad thing. They mounted up and continued following the river for several more miles before the tracks veered away toward a series of low mesas. The going became slower as they picked their way through rocky terrain, always alert for signs of their quarry. As the sun began to set, Drake led them to a secluded spot among a cluster of boulders. We'll camp here tonight. Good visibility, defensible position. They made a cold camp, no fire that might be spotted from a distance, and ate a simple supper as darkness settled over the land. The stars emerged, brilliant and countless in the clear desert sky. "It's beautiful," Sophia murmured, gazing upward, "even in all this desolation." Drake nodded, his face half hidden in shadow. "That's the territory for you, beautiful and deadly all at once." He looked at her, "Like some people I've met." Sophia felt her cheeks warm at the implied compliment. "I'm hardly deadly, Mr. Holloway. You're getting there." There was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Your shooting's improved considerably. I had a good teacher. And a determined student." He leaned back against his saddle, his eyes still on her. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "What was your life like?" Before all this happened, the question caught her off guard. It had been so long since she'd thought about her life before vengeance consumed it. It was ordinary, safe. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "My father was a banker in St. Louis. We had a nice home, respectable friends. I had suitors, was expected to make a good match someday." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "I complained about how boring it all was, how predictable. And then my father decided to expand west, open a new bank in Santa Fe. We traveled together, my parents, my brother Daniel, and me. We were almost there when—" Her voice trailed off. "The Blackwells," Drake finished for her. She nodded. "They stopped our wagon train, said they were just going to rob us. But then someone recognized my father from a bank in Kansas City, where they'd been caught trying to pass counterfeit bills. After that, She swallowed hard. "They made examples of my parents, left the rest of the wagon train alive, but took everything of value. And your brother." "Daniel and I weren't together when it happened. He'd ridden ahead with some of the other young men to scout the trail. When he returned and found what had happened, he swore to hunt them down." Her voice hardened. "He spent 2 years tracking them, sending me letters about his progress. Then 3 weeks ago, his letters stopped. The last one I received was stained with his blood." Drake was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Sophia. No one should have to endure what you have. What about you?" she asked, eager to shift the focus from her painful memories. "You mentioned your father was a teacher. Do you have other family?" "Just my sister now. Parents both gone, father to influenza, mother to a heart condition." Drake gazed up at the stars. "I was always the restless one. Couldn't wait to head west after the war, see what was out here. Emily, my sister, she's the sensible one. Married a lawyer, lives a respectable life." "Do you regret it? Coming west?" Drake considered the question. "No, despite everything, the hardships, the losses, no. Out here, a man stands or falls on his own merits. There's a clarity to that I've always appreciated." Sophia understood what he meant. For all its dangers, there was an honesty to life in the territory that the polite society of St. Louis had lacked. "We should get some sleep," Drake said, checking his pocket watch. "I'll take first watch, wake you in 4 hours." Sophia nodded, unrolling her bedroll and settling in. Despite the hard ground beneath her, she felt strangely at peace. They were hunting killers, yes, but for the first time since her brother's death, she wasn't alone in her quest. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft sounds of the desert night and Drake's steady breathing nearby. Soon, sleep claimed her. Drake's hand on her shoulder woke her what seemed like moments later. "Sophia," he whispered urgently. "Wake up." She was instantly alert, reaching for the rifle beside her bedroll. "What is it?" "Riders, coming this way." He pointed toward the east, where the faintest hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Sophia strained her eyes and ears. In the distance, she could make out the sound of horses moving at a steady trot, and as her eyes adjusted, she saw dust rising from behind a nearby ridge. "Is it them?" she whispered. "Can't tell yet, but 7 riders at this hour in this territory? Good chance." Drake was already gathering their gear, moving with quiet efficiency. "We need to get to a better position. Follow me." They quickly saddled their horses and led them deeper into the jumble of boulders, finding a spot where they could observe the trail below while remaining hidden. The riders were coming closer, their voices now audible though the words were indistinct. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest as she gripped her rifle. After all these months of searching, of planning, the Blackwell Gang might be within her sights. Drake crouched beside her, his own rifle ready, his expression tense but focused. The riders came into view, 7 men on trail-worn horses, moving at a relaxed pace. At their head rode a tall man with a distinctive scar across his right cheek, exactly as depicted in Drake's sketches. "Jeremiah Blackwell," Drake whispered, confirming what Sophia already knew. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but Drake's hand closed over hers. "Not yet," he breathed. "We're outnumbered. We watch, we follow, we wait for the right moment." Every instinct in Sophia screamed to take the shot, to end Blackwell's life now, but she forced herself to heed Drake's words. He was right, firing now would likely get them both killed, and justice would never be served. The gang passed directly below their position, close enough that Sophia could see the dust on their clothes, hear their casual conversation. "Should be safe at the old mission," one was saying. "Nobody's been there in years." 3 days, we rest, then head for the border, Blackwell replied, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "McGrath will have our papers ready in Nogales." They continued down the trail, unaware of the eyes watching them, and soon disappeared around a bend. Only when the sound of their horses had faded completely did Drake relax his grip on Sophia's hand. "The old mission," he said thoughtfully, "must mean San Xavier del Sur. It's been abandoned since the Apache raids 10 years ago." "How far?" Sophia asked, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "About 15 miles southwest of here, isolated spot in the foothills." Drake turned to her, his expression serious. "You did well. It couldn't have been easy to let them ride past." "It wasn't," she admitted, "but you were right. We need to be smart about this." Drake nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Let's give them a couple hours head start, then follow. The mission's a good spot for an ambush, but it's also a place where they'll feel safe enough to let their guard down." They waited until the sun was fully up before setting out, following the gang's trail at a cautious distance. The terrain became increasingly rugged as they approached the foothills, forcing them to pick their way carefully among rocks and dry arroyos. By mid-afternoon, Drake called a halt, pointing to a distant structure nestled against a hillside. "There it is, San Xavier del Sur." Through her field glasses, Sophia could make out the crumbling adobe walls of the old mission, its bell tower still standing despite years of neglect. Smoke rose from within its walls, evidence that the Blackwells had indeed made it their temporary hideout. "Now what?" she asked, lowering the glasses. "Now we get closer, find a good observation point, and learn their routine." Drake studied the surrounding terrain. "There, that ridgeline to the south. Should give us a clear view of the mission courtyard without exposing us." It took them nearly an hour of careful movement to reach the position Drake had indicated. From there, they had an excellent view of the mission and its immediate surroundings. The Blackwells had made themselves at home horses in the old corral, bedrolls spread in what had once been the chapel, a cooking fire in the courtyard. Drake and Sophia settled in to watch, taking turns with the field glasses, noting the positions of sentries, the comings and goings of each gang member. As evening approached, Blackwell and 2 others rode out, returning an hour later with a deer carcass for their supper. "They're comfortable," Drake observed. "No double sentries, relaxed movements. They don't expect trouble here." "Good," Sophia said grimly. "That will make this easier." Drake gave her a searching look. "Sophia, I need to be clear about something. Our goal is to capture them for trial, not to execute them. Even after all they've done, after the lives they've taken, especially after all that, they deserve justice, real justice, not frontier justice." His expression was unyielding. "If we kill them in cold blood, we're no better than they are." Sophia wanted to argue but found she couldn't. The past few days with Drake had begun to shift something inside her. The blind rage that had driven her for so long was gradually being tempered by his steady influence, his unwavering moral compass. "What's your plan, then?" she asked finally. Tomorrow, I'll ride to the nearest settlement, San Miguel, about 20 miles east. Telegraph the territorial marshal, request a posse. Drake laid out a rough map he'd sketched. If all goes well, they could be here within 2 days. Meanwhile, you'll stay here, keep watch, make sure the Blackwells don't move on. Alarm flared in Sophia's chest. You're leaving me alone. You're ready for this, Sophia. I've seen how quickly you learn, how steady you are under pressure. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Besides, I'll only be gone a day, maybe less. She knew it was the logical course of action. Someone needed to alert the authorities, and she was the one with the personal stake in keeping eyes on the Blackwells. Still, the thought of Drake riding away, leaving her alone so close to the killers who had destroyed her family, sent a chill through her. What if something goes wrong? What if they spot me or decide to leave suddenly? If anything changes, anything at all, you ride for San Miguel immediately. No heroics. His blue eyes held hers intently. Promise me, Sophia. I promise, she said softly. They maintained their vigil as darkness fell, watching as the Blackwells settled in for the night. 2 men took first watch, one in the bell tower, one at the mission gate, while the others bedded down in the chapel. Get some sleep, Drake told her. I'll wake you before dawn to go over the plan one more time before I leave. Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The emotional strain of seeing Blackwell, of being so close to her vengeance yet having to wait, had drained her more than she realized. She settled onto her bedroll, her rifle close at hand, and despite her racing thoughts, fell quickly into sleep. She dreamed of her family, not of their deaths, as she so often did, but of happier times. Her father teaching her to ride in the park on Sundays, her mother reading to her in the evening, her brother teasing her about her suitors. In the dream, they were all together in their scent. Louis home, and Sophia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Then, in that strange way of dreams, Drake was there too, seated at their dinner table, laughing with her father, completely at ease. He looked up, caught her eye across the table, and smiled a warm, intimate smile that made her heart skip. Sophia woke with a start, momentarily disoriented. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, and Drake was crouched beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Time to get ready, he said quietly. I need to leave soon if I'm going to reach San Miguel by midday. She sat up, pushing away the lingering images from her dream. I'm awake. They shared a cold breakfast while Drake went over his plan once more. Remember, your job is observation only. Keep track of their movements, their routines. If all goes well, I'll be back tomorrow with enough men to take them safely. And if they try to leave before then, follow at a distance, keep track of their direction, but don't engage, no matter what. His expression was deadly serious. I can't lose you to them too, Sophia. Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made her breath catch. You won't, she promised. Drake gathered his gear and prepared to leave, checking his weapons one last time. Before mounting his horse, he turned to Sophia, hesitating as if struggling with what to say. Be careful, he finally said. These men are dangerous and they've got nothing to lose. I will. She reached out impulsively, taking his hand. You be careful too. He squeezed her hand, then leaned forward and pressed a quick, gentle kiss to her forehead. I'll be back before you know it. Then he was gone, leading his horse down the backside of the ridge until he was out of sight of the mission, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts, her rifle, and the killers who had taken everything from her. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Sophia maintained her vigil, recording in a small notebook every movement of the gang members, every change of guard, every departure and return. The Blackwells seemed in no hurry to leave. They spent the day cleaning weapons, repairing tack, and generally relaxing as if on vacation rather than running from the law. By late afternoon, a change in their routine caught her attention. Blackwell and 3 others saddled their horses and rode out, heading north. Through her field glasses, Sophia watched them until they disappeared from view, then quickly checked her map. North would take them toward the small settlement of Agua Fria, possibly for supplies, or perhaps to scout their next move. With only 3 men remaining at the mission, Sophia felt a dangerous idea forming in her mind. This might be her best opportunity, perhaps her only opportunity to get close enough to learn more about their plans, maybe even to set a trap for their return. She knew she'd promised Drake not to take any risks, but this wasn't recklessness, she told herself. This was strategic. If she could get closer, perhaps even inside the mission while most of the gang was away, she might gather valuable information that would help when the posse arrived. Decision made, Sophia waited until dusk began to settle over the land before making her move. She secured her horse in a sheltered arroyo, took her rifle and pistol, and began making her way down from the ridgeline, using the growing shadows for cover. The mission was larger than it had appeared from a distance, its adobe walls crumbling in places but still substantial. Sophia approached from the rear, where a partially collapsed section of wall offered access to what had once been the priest's quarters. She moved silently, grateful for Drake's lessons in stealth, and slipped through the opening without incident. Inside, she found herself in a small room with a doorway leading to a corridor. Voices drifted from somewhere ahead, the remaining gang members, apparently relaxing after their day of idleness. Sophia crept forward, hugging the wall, her heart pounding so loudly she feared they might hear it. The corridor opened onto the central courtyard, now in deep shadow as night fell. Through a doorway on the opposite side, Sophia could see light flickering of fire or lanterns in what must be the chapel. The voices were clearer now, 3 men talking and laughing, completely at ease. "Be back by morning, and then we're off to Mexico," one was saying. "Blackwell says McGrath's got a ranch waiting for us just south of the border. Federales won't touch us there." "What about that marshal who's been trailing us? Holloway?" another asked. "Ain't seen sign of him in months." "Probably gave up after what we did to his partner." Sophia froze at the mention of Drake's name. They knew he'd been tracking them. Were they aware that he was in the area now? Had they somehow spotted him leaving? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a horse approaching a single rider, coming fast. The men in the chapel fell silent, then one called out, "Who's that riding in?" "It's me, you idiots." Came the reply, a voice Sophia recognized from that morning as belonging to one of the Keller brothers. "We got trouble." Sophia pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the rider dismounted in the courtyard. The remaining gang members emerged from the chapel, hands on their weapons. "What kind of trouble?" one demanded. "Where's Blackwell?" "He sent me back to warn you. Spotted a rider heading east from these parts earlier today. Looked like he was making for San Miguel. Blackwell's gone to intercept him, but says we need to be ready to ride at first light." Sophia's blood ran cold. They'd seen Drake. Blackwell was going after him, 3 against 1. She had to warn him somehow, had to reach him before they did. In her distress, she must have made some sound, for suddenly one of the men turned toward her hiding place. "What was that?" "What was what?" "Thought I heard something, over by the old quarters. Probably just a rat. Places crawling with him," but the man wasn't satisfied. He drew his pistol and started toward Sophia's position. "I'm gonna check it out." Sophia retreated back down the corridor, looking frantically for an escape route. The room she'd entered through seemed miles away now, and the approaching footsteps told her she wouldn't make it in time. Reaching a small alcove, she pressed herself into it, raising her pistol. If discovered, she would have no choice but to fight, and the gunshots would alert the others. Her chances of escaping would be slim to none. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped just short of her hiding place. Sophia held her breath, finger tense on the trigger. "Ah, hell with it," the man muttered after a long moment. "Just jumpy, I guess." The footsteps receded, and Sophia sagged against the wall in relief. She had to get out, had to reach her horse and try to find Drake before Blackwell did. Moving as quietly as possible, she retraced her steps to the breach in the wall and slipped outside into the now dark night. The journey back to her horse seemed to take forever. each step fraught with the possibility of discovery. When she finally reached the arroyo where she'd left her mount, she wasted no time in saddling up and heading east the direction Drake had taken that morning. She rode hard, pushing her horse as fast as she dared in the darkness, fear for Drake driving her forward. The moon provided just enough light to follow the trail, and Sophia silently thanked Drake for his lessons in navigation by the stars. After what seemed like hours, she spotted a faint glow ahead of campfire. She slowed her approach, dismounting and leading her horse the final few hundred yards. It could be Drake, stopping to rest for the night before continuing to San Miguel in the morning, or it could be Blackwell and his men, lying in wait. As she drew closer, she could make out a single figure seated by the small fire, and her heart leapt with recognition. Drake. He was alone, apparently unaware of the danger pursuing him. Sophia approached carefully, not wanting to startle him. "Drake," she called softly when she was within earshot. "It's me." He was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, then relaxed when he recognized her. "Sophia. What are you doing here? What's happened?" She quickly explained what she'd overheard at the mission, watching his expression darken as she spoke. "You shouldn't have left your post," he said when she finished, but there was more concern than anger in his voice. "But I'm glad you did. If Blackwell's hunting me, he can't be far behind." "We need to move," Sophia urged. "Find somewhere more defensible." Drake nodded, already gathering his gear. "There's a box canyon about 2 miles north of here, narrow entrance, good visibility. We can hold it against superior numbers, if we have to." They doused the fire and rode out, Drake leading the way through the darkness with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the terrain. The canyon, when they reached it, was exactly as Drake had described, a natural fortress with high walls and a single entrance barely wide enough for 2 horses to ride abreast. They dismounted at the back of the canyon, securing their horses behind a cluster of boulders. Drake quickly organized their position, setting up firing lanes that covered the entrance while providing them with adequate cover. "Now we wait," he said, checking his weapons one last time. "If Blackwell comes, he'll have to come through that entrance. And if he doesn't, we'll head for San Miguel at first light." Sophia settled in beside him, her rifle ready, her mind racing with the events of the day. "I'm sorry I didn't keep my promise," she said after a moment. "About staying put, observing only." Drake glanced at her, his expression softening in the faint moonlight. "You may have saved my life, Sophia. Hard to be angry about that. Still, I took a risk. After everything you said about being careful, sometimes the right choice isn't the safe choice." He reached over and briefly squeezed her hand. "Just don't make a habit of it." They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as they maintained their vigil. The night was clear and cold, the stars brilliant overhead, the only sounds the occasional shifting of their horses and the whisper of the wind through the canyon walls. "Drake," Sophia said softly after a long silence, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. What happens after?" "If we succeed, if the Blackwells face justice, what then?" He turned to look at her, his face partially shadowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean for us, for me." She struggled to articulate the thoughts that had been forming since their first meeting. "I've been so focused on vengeance for so long, I haven't thought about what comes after. But now you're starting to wonder if there might be something worth living for beyond revenge," he finished for her. "Yes." She looked down at her hands, suddenly vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with their precarious situation. "Is that foolish?" "No," Drake's voice was gentle. "It's human, and it's the first sign that you're healing." "And you," she pressed. "What will you do when this is over?" Drake was silent for a moment. "Go back to my ranch. Continue building something worthwhile." He paused. "Maybe not alone, if I'm fortunate." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to address it directly. Before Sophia could respond, a sound from the canyon entrance caught their attention, the soft click of a horse's hoof on stone. Drake signaled for silence, both of them instantly alert, weapons ready. The sound came again, closer now, accompanied by the faint jingle of spurs. "They found us," Sophia whispered. Drake nodded grimly. "Get ready," a voice called from the darkness near the canyon entrance. "Holloway, I know you're in there, you and whoever came to warn you." Jeremiah Blackwell. Sophia would know that voice anywhere. It had haunted her nightmares for years. "Come on out and face me like a man," Blackwell continued, "or we can wait you out. Your choice." Drake didn't respond, instead motioning for Sophia to move to a better position behind a large boulder. He took up a spot on the opposite side of the canyon, creating a crossfire that would catch anyone attempting to enter. "Not feeling talkative, Marshall?" Blackwell called again. "That's all right. I've got all night." A pause. "Your lady friend, though she might want to consider her options." "My boys back at the mission say she was mighty interested in our conversation earlier. Brave girl, sneaking in like that. Be a shame if something happened to her." Sophia felt a chill. They'd known she was there all along. They'd let her escape, perhaps hoping she'd lead them straight to Drake, which was exactly what she'd done. Drake caught her eye across the canyon and shook his head slightly, warning her not to respond to the taunt. He was right. Engaging Blackwell in conversation would only give away their positions. Minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by occasional calls from Blackwell, each more taunting than the last. Sophia maintained her vigil, scanning the canyon entrance for any sign of movement, her finger resting lightly on the trigger of her rifle. A flash of movement caught her eye, something small arcing through the air toward them. Before she could call a warning, there was a deafening explosion and a blinding flash of light. "Dynamite," Drake shouted. "Get down!" The blast shook the canyon, sending rocks and debris raining down. Dust filled the air, choking and disorienting. Through the chaos, Sophia heard the pounding of hooves, riders charging into the canyon under cover of the explosion. She tried to aim, to find a target in the swirling dust, but it was impossible to see clearly. A shot rang out from Drake's position, followed by a cry of pain from one of the attackers. Then they were upon them, 3 riders, guns blazing, charging through the narrow confines of the canyon. Sophia fired, saw one man reel in his saddle, then had to duck as bullets whizzed past her head. "Sophia," Drake's voice called through the chaos. "Fall back." She scrambled backward, keeping low, finding new cover behind a fallen boulder. From there, she had a better angle and managed to get off 2 more shots, one of which found its mark. Another rider went down, leaving only Blackwell himself still mounted. The outlaw leader wheeled his horse around, seeking cover of his own as bullets from both Sophia and Drake forced him on the defensive. For a moment, the shooting stopped, an eerie silence falling over the canyon. "You're alone now, Blackwell," Drake called out. "Your men are down. Surrender and you'll get a fair trial." A harsh laugh was the only response, followed by a shot that ricocheted off the rock near Sophia's head. "I don't surrender, Marshall," Blackwell shouted. "Never have, never will." "Then you'll die here," Drake replied evenly. "Your choice." More silence, then the unmistakable sound of a horse being urged forward. Sophia tensed, ready to fire, but what happened next took her completely by surprise. Blackwell burst from his cover, but instead of charging toward either of them, he rode straight for the back of the canyon toward their horses. Before either could react, he had reached Sophia's mount, grabbed the reins, and was turning to make his escape. Drake stood, taking careful aim, but held his fire. "He's using your horse as a shield," he called to Sophia. "I don't have a clean shot." Sophia watched in horror as Blackwell, now mounted on his own horse but leading hers, began to make his way toward the canyon entrance. If he escaped now, they might never find him again. In that moment, everything slowed down for Sophia. She saw Drake, still seeking a shot that wouldn't harm her horse. She saw Blackwell, his scarred face twisted in a triumphant snarl as he neared the canyon entrance. And she saw her chance one clear moment when his body was exposed between the 2 horses. She took a deep breath, steadied her aim just as Drake had taught her, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the canyon. Blackwell jerked, then toppled sideways from his saddle, landing heavily on the rocky ground. Both horses bolted at the sound, running past him toward the canyon entrance. "Hold your fire," Drake called, already moving toward the fallen outlaw. Sophia approached cautiously, her rifle still trained on Blackwell. The man was alive but badly wounded, blood spreading across his chest from a shot that had entered just below his shoulder. Drake kicked Blackwell's dropped pistol away, then knelt to check the severity of the wound. "He'll live," he announced after a moment, "long enough to stand trial anyway." Blackwell glared up at them, his eyes burning with hatred. "Should have killed me when you had the chance," he gasped. "That's not justice," Drake replied. "Justice is seeing you hang after a jury hears about all the lives you've taken." Sophia stood over the man who had haunted her nightmares for years, the man responsible for destroying her family. She had imagined this moment countless times facing him, watching him die by her hand. But now that it was here, she felt nothing but a strange emptiness where her rage had been. "You don't even remember them, do you?" she asked quietly. "Thomas and Alina Blackwood, the banker and his wife that you murdered 2 years ago near Santa Fe." Recognition flickered in Blackwell's eyes, followed by a dismissive sneer. "Killed a lot of people, girl. Can't expect me to remember them all. They were my parents." Sophia's voice was steady, her hand on her pistol. "And my brother Daniel, you killed him 3 weeks ago." "The one who'd been tracking us," Blackwell coughed, blood speckling his lips. Persistent fellow, almost admired his determination. Drake watched Sophia carefully, perhaps wondering if she would give in to the temptation to end Blackwell's life here and now, but the urge had passed. Sophia holstered her pistol and turned away. "Bind his wound," she told Drake. "Make sure he lives to face the judge." Relief and pride mingled in Drake's expression as he set about tending to Blackwell's injury. Using strips torn from the outlaw's own shirt, he fashioned a crude bandage that would keep him alive until they could reach proper medical care. "What about the others?" Sophia asked, gesturing to the 2 fallen gang members. Drake checked them both. "This one's dead," he said of the first. The others unconscious but breathing. Bullet grazed his skull. By the time they had secured both prisoners, Blackwell to his own horse and the wounded gang member to Drake's Dawn was breaking over the canyon rim. The remaining gang members at the mission would be preparing to depart, unaware of their leader's fate. "We need to move fast," Drake said, checking his pocket watch. "If we can reach San Miguel by noon, we can get word to the territorial marshal about the others before they scatter." Sophia mounted her recovered horse, watching as Drake secured the lead rope attached to Blackwell's mount. The outlaw sat slumped in his saddle, secured with ropes to prevent any attempt at escape, his face pale from blood loss but his eyes still burning with defiance. "Ready?" Drake asked her. Sophia nodded, taking one last look at the man who had been the focus of her existence for so long. Blackwell met her gaze unflinchingly, his contempt evident even in his weakened state. "This isn't over," he growled. "For you, it is," she replied calmly, then turned her horse toward the canyon entrance and the rising sun beyond. They reached San Miguel by mid-afternoon, their arrival causing a sensation in the small settlement. The local sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Harkins, could scarcely believe his eyes when Drake rode in with Jeremiah Blackwell in tow. "Sweet Jesus," he exclaimed, staring at the infamous outlaw. "You actually caught him." "We did," Drake confirmed, dismounting stiffly after the long ride. "And we need to send telegrams immediately. The rest of his gang is at the old San Xavier mission, but they'll be moving out soon if they haven't already." While the sheriff and his deputies secured the prisoners, Drake and Sophia made their way to the telegraph office. Messages were sent to the territorial marshal in Tucson, to the sheriffs of neighboring counties, and to the army post at Fort Huachuca, alerting them to the capture of Blackwell and the location of the remaining gang members. "Now we wait," Drake said as they emerged from the telegraph office. "With any luck, they'll have the mission surrounded by nightfall." The local doctor had tended to Blackwell's wound, declaring that while serious, it wouldn't prove fatal with proper care. The outlaw and his still unconscious companion were secured in the town jail, with additional deputies called in to guard them. Sheriff Harkins offered Drake and Sophia the use of rooms above the town's small hotel, an offer they gratefully accepted. After days on the trail and the intense confrontation in the canyon, they were both exhausted. "Get some rest," Drake told Sophia as they parted in the hotel hallway. "I'll wake you if there's any news." Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of how drained she felt not just physically, but emotionally. The moment she'd dreamed of for so long had finally arrived, and while it hadn't played out exactly as she'd imagined, Blackwell would face justice for his crimes. Her family would be avenged, not through murder, but through the law. She entered her room, a simple space with a narrow bed, washstand, and single window overlooking the main street. After washing away the dust and grime of the trail, she lay down, expecting sleep to claim her immediately. Instead, she found herself wide awake, her mind racing with thoughts of what had happened and what might come next. For so long, vengeance had been her sole purpose, the thing that got her out of bed each morning, that kept her moving forward through grief. Now that it was essentially accomplished, what remained, a soft knock at her door, roused her from these thoughts. "Sophia, are you awake?" Drake's voice called quietly. She rose and opened the door to find him looking as tired as she felt, but with an undeniable light in his eyes. "What is it?" "Is there news?" He nodded. "Just got word. Army patrol and a posse from Tucson surrounded the mission an hour ago. Caught the remaining gang members without firing a shot. It's over, Sophia. They're all in custody." Relief washed over her, so powerful she had to steady herself against the doorframe. "All of them? You're sure?" "All of them," Drake confirmed. "The Blackwell Gang is finished." Tears filled Sophia's eyes, not of grief or rage, but of release. The burden she'd carried for so long was finally lifting. "I don't know what to feel," she admitted, wiping her eyes. "I thought I'd feel, I don't know, triumphant, satisfied, but mostly I just feel empty," Drake suggested gently. "Yes. As if all the anger that's been driving me has suddenly burned away, and I'm not sure what's left." Drake stepped closer, his expression understanding. "What's left is you, Sophia. The woman you were always meant to be, before tragedy and vengeance took over your life." He reached out hesitantly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And from where I'm standing, that's someone pretty remarkable." Sophia looked up at him, seeing not just the capable former marshal or the skilled rancher, but the man who had believed in her, guided her, and ultimately helped her find a kind of peace she'd thought forever lost. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "There'll be trials. Blackwell and his men will face a judge in Tucson, probably within the month. With the evidence against them and multiple witnesses, they'll hang." Drake's hand lingered near her face. "After that, well, that depends on you. On me, on what you want, now that this chapter is closing." His blue eyes searched hers. "You could go back east, start over, or, she prompted when he hesitated, "or you could come back to the Double H with me." The words came in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for some time. "I know it's not the life you were raised for, and I know we haven't known each other long, but—" He took a deep breath. "I care for you, Sophia, more than I thought possible in such a short time." Sophia felt her heart race at his words. The attraction between them had been building since their first meeting, but hearing him voice it made it suddenly, wonderfully real. "The ranch would need a lot of work," he continued when she didn't immediately respond. "And I can't promise it would be easy, but it could be a good life. A life worth living." Sophia thought of the dream she'd had Drake at her family's table, belonging there as if he'd always been part of their lives. Perhaps it hadn't been just a dream, but a glimpse of a different kind of future than the one she'd been pursuing. "I don't know anything about ranching," she said finally. A smile tugged at Drake's lips. "You're a quick study. You learn to track and shoot in days. I reckon ranching wouldn't pose much of a challenge for you. And would I be coming as your What? Your housekeeper, your partner. Drake's smile faded, replaced by an expression of complete seriousness. You'd be coming as whatever you wanted to be, Sophia, but I hope, in time, you might consider becoming my wife. The word hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning and possibility. Sophia searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation, but found only sincerity and something else, something that looked very much like love. You said when we met that I couldn't be saved, Drake reminded her softly. I said I'd prove you wrong, have I? Sophia thought of the woman she'd been just a week ago, consumed by vengeance, empty of everything but rage and grief. And she thought of who she was now, standing on the threshold of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Yes, she whispered. You have. Drake's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. Then say yes, Sophia, come home with me, help me build something worth having. Instead of answering with words, Sophia rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Drake pulled her closer, his arms strong and sure around her. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Sophia smiled up at him. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. Relief and joy transformed Drake's tired features. He kissed her again, more briefly this time, then rested his forehead against hers. We'll leave as soon as the marshal arrives to take custody of Blackwell. Should be tomorrow or the next day. Sophia nodded, content for the first time in years. The path ahead wasn't clear or certain, but it was a path she would walk with someone beside her, someone who had shown her that even after the darkest night, dawn would come again. The trials of Jeremiah Blackwell and his gang became the sensation of the Arizona Territory that summer. Witnesses came from 3 territories to testify against them, including Sophia, who faced her family's killer with quiet dignity that impressed even the hardened judge. As Drake had predicted, the evidence was overwhelming, and all 7 men were sentenced to hang for their crimes. Sophia and Drake were married in a simple ceremony at the Double H Ranch 2 weeks after the verdicts were delivered. Saul stood as Drake's best man, and to Sophia's surprise, Drake's sister, Emily, traveled from Denver to stand with her. It was a small gathering, but filled with genuine warmth and hope for the future. Life at the ranch proved challenging but deeply rewarding. Sophia took to ranching with the same determination she'd shown in hunting Blackwell, learning every aspect of the operation from cattle management to bookkeeping. Within a year, she had implemented improvements that increased the ranch's profitability substantially. Drake, for his part, found in Sophia not just a wife but a true partner, someone who challenged him, supported him, and loved him with the same fierce devotion she brought to everything she cared about. Together, they expanded the Double H, adding land and cattle, making it one of the most successful operations in the territory. On the first anniversary of their meeting, Drake presented Sophia with a gift, a small wooden box containing the badge he'd worn as a marshal. I want you to have this, he told her as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. To remind you of how we found each other. Sophia ran her fingers over the tarnished metal star. I don't need reminders, she said softly. But I'll treasure it anyway. She leaned against his shoulder. You know, when I said I couldn't be saved, I truly believed it. And now, Drake's arm tightened around her waist. Now I know better. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears, not of grief this time, but of gratitude and love. You didn't just save me from Blackwell or even from my own vengeance. You saved me from a life without hope, without love. Drake kissed her tenderly. We saved each other, he corrected. And we'll keep on doing that, every day, for the rest of our lives. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, Sophia Holloway looked out at the land that had become her home, at the life she had built from the ashes of tragedy, and knew with absolute certainty that some promises were meant to be kept, especially those made by stubborn cowboys who refused to believe that anyone was beyond saving. 2 years later, The Double H Ranch welcomed its newest resident, a daughter, Sarah Eleanor Holloway, named for both her maternal grandmother and Sophia's mother. With her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit, she became the center of their world, a living symbol of the future they had fought so hard to create. And when she was old enough to understand, they would tell her the story of how they met of a girl who believed she couldn't be saved, and the cowboy who proved her wrong.